Hey everyone, this is Mark from Circle of the Dark Mother. If you like our content, please like and subscribe. This time I want to talk about Lilith with her Mesopotamian aspects for the Tree of Life and the Tree of Shadows. If you've read my book, Embodying Lilith, a Gnostic Kabbalah of Lilith, or you've watched the video I already have on aspects of Lilith that talks about the Tree of Life and Tree of Shadows, that both of those talk about Lilith from a more modern and Judaic standpoint. I've been doing research into Lilith's, very, very early appearances in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia being the Fertile Crescent in what is now the Middle East. And what this is really going deep into the aspects of her from prehistory and into history. Mesopotamia consisted of the city-states of Sumer, the land of Akkad, later the Assyrian Empire, and then the Babylonian Empire. Beyond that, there were also other areas like both Israel and Judah, Canaan, and other cultures that were around that area. So there's a little bit of that thrown in as well. So let's dig in. So the first sphere, which on the Tree of Life, the Sephira or Sphere of Light is called Malkut, which means kingdom. On the Tree of Shadows, the Klipha, or the Husk of Darkness, is called Lilith, Queen of the Night. This aspect's name in Akkadian is Kalili. Her name means woman in the window, and this correlates to the aspect of Lilith from the more modern age of Neama. Kalili is an Akkadian goddess and demon found throughout Mesopotamia, who is often depicted as or with an owl. She is called the woman in the window, who rules over sex and night. Depictions of Kalili have been found in temples in the cities of Assur and Uruk in Mesopotamia. And in fact, there are wall hangings and metal imprints of her face, and always within a window frame. So this is the first aspect of Lilith, and really, this idea of her as someone who is involved in seduction, night, and of course owls, and you'll see that theme through a lot of these. Sphere 2, on the Tree of Life, it is Yesod, foundation. On the Tree of Shadows is Gamaliel, the obscene ones. The aspect at this point, the Sumerian name is Ki Sikil Lil Laki. The Akkadian name is Lalaki. The meaning of her name is Maiden of Desolation, and the aspect of Lilith in the more recent Kabbalistic form is Lilith the Younger. Lalaki's name has been translated as the beautiful woman or the Maiden of Desolation, as she's been associated with owls, and she has been associated with owls. I know it's sort of interesting that she's called the beautiful woman or the Maiden of Desolation, which don't sound related, but we have to remember that strings of cuneiform in Sumerian are all syllables, and they are a little bit up for translation. So that's how we get to these two sort of different ways of looking at it. So far, the Epic of Gilgamesh is the only time that this name has been found in Sumerian texts. So it may not be a name, it may actually be a title for Lilith at this aspect. The myth of Gilgamesh details how the goddess Inanna, later to be known as Ishtar, wants to cut down a white willow tree and make furniture from it. And this furniture is a bed and a throne. And since Inanna is a goddess of love and war, these would be holy pieces of furniture for her temple. Unfortunately, there's a problem. The tree has a snake that cannot be charmed at its roots, a zoo bird nesting in its branches, and Kisikil Lilaki is inhabiting its trunk. The thing to see here is that none of these are normal beings from a standpoint. The snake, which cannot be charmed, is a demonic being that's a trickster. The zoo bird is a dragon bird that's both god and demon that stole the tablets of creation from the Mesopotamian gods in other myths. And then Lalaki is this aspect of Lilith inside the tree. So this is a very complex story, and I do have a video about the tree and this myth. I can't remember if it's already on the channel or if I'm going to be putting it out there. I've already recorded it. So more information on that. Sphere 3. On the tree of life, it is Hod, splendor. On the tree of shadows, it's Samiel, the poison of God. The Akkadian name for this aspect is Abtagigi, and the meaning of her name is she who sends messages of desire. The aspect of Lilith in the more modern age is as, which you will maybe remember if you saw the other video or read my book, is an anthropomorphic version of Lilith that is a mermaid or a lamia with a snake body or a spider goddess. Abtagigi is another goddess and demon in both Akkad and Assyria. Her name means she who sends messages of desire. In this, she is said to awaken and stimulate desire in people. It is believed that she is another form of Kalili, and we'll see in a little bit Bariritu, and she's also associated with owls, which is another reason they think she's associated with Kalili and Bariritu. When I do want to mention, which I've mentioned in other videos, in Mesopotamia, goddesses and gods can be demons at the same time. Gods follow the rules, demons do whatever they want. And so a god can be both a god and a demon, and a spirit can be a spirit and a demon. In this case, because of the names and because of certain other attributes, they are goddesses and demons. At sphere 4 on the tree of life, which is Netzach, victory, on the tree of shadows, Arab Zorak, the ravens of dispersion. The Sumerian name for this entity is Ki El Lillah. The Akkadian name is Ardat Lili, which is also the aspect of Lili in the more modern times, because that myth of Ardat Lili has hung on for centuries. One of the earliest mentions of a Lilith type being in Mesopotamia, but she's still around. The meaning of her name is handmaiden of Lilith, and it's believed that she's actually the handmaiden of Lilitu. So Ardat Lili's name in Sumerian means handmaiden of Lilith, which attests to her status as either a servant or aspect of Lilitu. Ardat Lili was said to enter through a window and was considered a spirit and demon of prostitution. So you keep hearing these things about entering through windows, sexual desire. You'll see a theme of air and night. And that's all of these aspects have those attributes. Sphere 5, tree of life is Tiferet, beauty. The tree of shadows is Thagirian, the disputers. The Akkadian name for this aspect is Bariritu, mentioned earlier. Her name means dusk, so that time right before night when the sun is setting and it's becoming dark. The aspect of Lilith in modern terms is Noria from the Gnostic texts, or Mary Magdalene from the Gnostic texts. Bariritu is a goddess and demon who originated in Akkad. Her name means dusk and is also associated with owls. She is a goddess of sex and night, and depictions of her have also been found in temples from the Akkadian and Assyrian periods. So many of these have, these aspects have made it through different eras within Mesopotamia and even been depicted in temples. Sphere 6, tree of life is Gevura, severity. The tree of shadows is Golachab, the flaming ones. The Sumerian name here is Dim-mi-a, and really important because dim.mi, which are obviously, because it's Sumerian, they are syllables. Dim.mi is the goddess demon Lamashtu. Other forms of dim-mi mean god or goddess or gods and goddesses. But when it has these different endings on it, it is different goddesses that are also demons. In this case, Dim-mi-a is Labasu, and her name's meaning is she who comes at night. The aspect of Lilith in the more modern times is Agrat Bat Malat, who is one of the most severe forms of Lilith, and Labasu is also very severe. She's sometimes considered, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but she's considered a sister of Lamashtu, and she is pretty severe. So Labasu, not to be confused with Lamashtu, is listed in the Sumerian god list as the goddess demon Dim-mi-a. Her name translates to she who comes at night. Semitic texts of later periods mention Labasu in passages that also mention Lilitu as demons that came from Babylon. Since the god list was written during the Assyrian period, much later than the Sumerian religion actually existed, Lamassu may also be an aspect of Lilith. And in fact, I consider her one. The whole thing that she is she who comes at night, and that the fact that there's sexuality components makes her, a prime candidate, and a very severe one at that. Sphere 7, the Tree of Life, it's Hesed, mercy. The Tree of Shadows is Ga Agshabela, the Smiters. So the name for this goddess is Belili, and that name is thought to be either pre-Sumerian or to come from another culture, and I'll include that in a minute. Her name we don't know its exact meaning, but there are two Belilis. There's a more modern one, and then an ancient goddess of the moon and underworld, who's later replaced in Assyrian and Akkadian texts as Ereshkigal, the sister of Inanna. But originally, in the far, far distant past, there was this goddess Belili. And the reason they think it's pre-Sumerian or a different culture is the name in its forms written in cuneiform don't match Sumerian names. The aspect of Lilith in the more modern time is Belquis, the queen of Sheba. And as I said, there are two goddesses in Mesopotamia named Belili. The more modern one is the sister of Tammuz, who's Inanna's consort, and that Belili is a sheep goddess. I don't think that goddess has anything to do with Lilith, because Lilith's not a sheep goddess in any way. But the more ancient Belili is an early primordial goddess who rules over the moon and underworld. Her name does not fit Sumerian language, and it is thought she was adopted from another culture. Because of her association with night and death, she is considered as possibly an early form of Lilith, and especially with the Lily part of her name. And it is possible there were cultures in Mesopotamia before the Sumerians came, so she could be from one of those cultures. Sphere 8 on the Tree of Life is Bina, understanding. The Tree of Shadows is Sateriel, the concealers. This goddess's name in Sumerian is Dim-mi-gi, and the Assyrian name in the Sumerian god list is Lilitu. And the name meaning is she who comes by wind, or she who is in the wind, or she who is in the air. And the aspect of Lilith in the more modern times is Lilith the Elder. There's people that claim there is no ancient history that shows Lilith as a goddess. That's because there's a lot of misinformation about the Lilin and Lilu, which were wind spirits, could be Lilith's children. We don't know. But because of that, people really have not dug deep enough. The Assyrian god list, which only lists gods and gods that are also demons, has Dim-mi-gi with the name Lilitu, and it is very obviously the Lilith we know. So in the text, Lilith has over 100 names and variations in myths, ranging from ancient Sumeria to Jewish mysticism to tribal Malaysia and to myths from around the third millennium. So huge history. The name Lilitu, listed in the Sumerian god list as Dim-mi-gi, translates to she of wind. Lilitu is a goddess and a demon. Theories on her parentage are many, because being a god or a goddess, they have to be descended from the primordial pair of gods that came out of Mesopotamia. So the theories on her parentage are many, with the most likely candidates being the sky god Anu or the air god Enlil. And one of the theories is that all of the Dim-mi goddesses, who are demons, are all sisters. Lilitu, Labasu, Lamashtu, Abizu, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and there are even others. And they all either are, in Lamashtu's case, Dim-mi. The rest of them are Dim-mi with some kind of suffix at the end. I do not believe Lilith is associated with Lamashtu, a sister possibly, but Lamashtu really is not about sex and night. She is a very vengeful, dark being who has a lot of animal parts to her makeup. I think they are related, but I don't think they're the same being. And that will go into more detail in my next book and in further videos. Sphere 9 on the Tree of Life it's Hokmah wisdom. The Tree of Shadows is Gagiel, the Hinderers. The Sumerian name here is Dim-mi-hab. The Assyrian name is Abizu. And the meaning is she who comes from water. The aspect of Lilith in the modern times is Abizuth. And, it's pretty obvious Abizuth comes from Abizu. Abizuth is mentioned in the Testament of Solomon, and it's the only place Abizuth is mentioned. But Abizu is mentioned in the Assyrian god list and in other texts. Abizu first appears in Mesopotamian texts as a god who is both male and female. She is associated with the water of the primordial ocean. Later, this original Abizu's role is broken into the god Apsu, which is fresh water, and Tiamat, salt water. Abizu originally was the combination of both of these. Later, she was redescribed as a female goddess demon who was associated with water consciousness, and in her darker form, she's the deity of abortions. Sphere 10, Tree of Life Sephira, is Keter crown, and the Tree of Shadows Clippa is Thamiel, the twin gods. The Sumerian name here is Mu-hu-bor, the Akkadian name being Omaroka, which is the same name as I'm associating in more modern times with this same aspect of Lilith. The name meaning for Mu-hu-bor is she who formed all things. Omaroka is beyond creation and beyond time, space, and human understanding. She is the great dragon of the void, which is the first desire of creation, and the chaos which sparks all. Omaroka is pure darkness, consciousness with no restraint. Omaroka's name is found in Mesopotamia, describing her as having a similar presentation to the dragon goddess Tiamat. And in some cases, it's thought they're the same being, in some cases different. And then Sphere 0, which is Deat, which is not actually a Sephiroth or a Qliphoth. It's a gateway between dimensions. On the Tree of Life, it is known as Deat knowledge, and the Tree of Shadows, it's known as Deat the abyss. So this goddess, this aspect, comes from a Semitic language, which Akkadian and Assyrian are both Semitic, just like Hebrew. So is Arabic, although Sumerian was not. Sumerian is its own language group that we have not found any similar group to. Now, there probably was in prehistory, but it never made it into writing, so we have nothing to compare it to. So Sumerian stands alone. In most Semitic languages, there are no vowels in the written language. Modern Hebrew does. I don't know about modern Arabic, but in ancient Semitic languages, there were no vowels. You sort of figured it out as you read. So the Semitic name would be represented by the English letters QDS. The Assyrian and Canaanite name is Ketesh. The name meaning is sacred ecstasy and sexual pleasure. And the aspect of Lilith in modern lore, I use as Aishid Zunanim, and it'll become clear why as we go through here. Ketesh was originally an Assyrian goddess, but she was also worshipped in the nearby land of Canaan. She is a goddess of lust and fertility. Ketesh probably comes from the Semitic word that later becomes Kodesh in Hebrew, which means holy. Because Ketesh is associated with lust, she's considered by many the Canaanite Lilith. Interestingly, the Hebrew demon Aishid Zunanim is also known in Midrash as Kodesha, which would be the Hebrew form of the Canaanite Ketesh. So there's a really strong link here between Ketesh and Aishid Zunanim. And obviously, I think Aishid Zunanim is a manifestation of Lilith. And in this case, I believe so is Ketesh. So those are the correspondences that I've put together for the Mesopotamian to the Kabbalistic text. And it may seem weird to be associating Mesopotamian names to Kabbalah, since it is known to be a Jewish tradition. However, the Mesopotamians, starting in Sumer, had their own kind of Kabbalah. They didn't call it that, of course. It was in Sumerian, it translates to the ladder of lights. And it is represented by planets and the sun, moon, just like Kabbalah. It is depicted very much the same in the way it's laid out. So really, Kabbalah is in Jewish tradition is probably remnants of the ladder of lights with some Egyptian mythology brought into the Jewish paradigm. And that's not to diss the Jewish paradigm. They took Kabbalah way further than these earlier civilizations did. And it is turned into this masterful, deep, amazing study and look at everything, life, deity, us. But there is a beginning in Mesopotamia. And also, since Lilith comes from Mesopotamia, it also makes sense to associate aspects of her from that region. So when you're working with her, you don't have to be complicated. You can just use Lilith. You don't have to use these other names. But what I'm trying to do with these series of correspondences is if you do work with Kabbalah, if you do want to work with a certain kind of aspect, you know what the names and personalities are. And in these cases, you can, again, just work with Lilith, or you can use the more modern names that come from demons and other entities that are associated with Lilith, or the Mesopotamian goddesses, goddess demons that are associated with her as well. And my next book, which I'm working on, which is called Empowering Lilith, Fueling the Lilith Within, will focus on Mesopotamian history, the Mesopotamian correspondences, magic. I'm not going to go deep into Kabbalah like the second book I did. It's going to be very focused on basically the magic like the Mesopotamians did, which is very similar to modern witchcraft, using stones, astrology, herbs, candles, the kinds of stuff we would use. They did a lot of incantations, and that will also be included. And then the third section to that book will be social justice, basically magic for the world, but all of it based in the Mesopotamian pieces. So hopefully you enjoyed this session. Hopefully it was useful, and we'll talk more about these aspects later. Thank you. Take care.